What if everything you've been told about yourself, your reality, even your potential, is incomplete? What if ascension isn't some distant spiritual fantasy, but a vibration already waking inside you, your body, your mind, your energy recalibrating to remember who you truly are? For years, society has taught you to look outside for power, validation, and truth. But what if the real shift has always been inside? This isn't about theory. It's about your nervous system, your consciousness, your very frequency aligning with a higher reality. The symptoms, the dreams, the restlessness, they're not random, they're signals. And if you're feeling it, you're ready to remember, embody, and live ascension now. Stick around, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about yourself forever. Ascension has become one of the most misunderstood words of our time. It's been stretched, diluted, dramatized, and turned into something it was never meant to be. A spectacle, a promise, a future event people wait for instead of participate in. Somewhere along the way, ascension stopped being about awareness and started being about fantasy. And that wasn't an accident. From the moment you first heard the word, it was framed as something external, something that would happen to you. A shift in the planets, a flash of light, a moment where everything suddenly makes sense and suffering dissolves. A clean escape from a messy world. That version of ascension is comforting. It's also false. Real ascension is not comforting. It's confrontational. Ascension isn't about leaving the world behind. It's about seeing it clearly for the first time. And clarity has a cost. Because once you see clearly, you can't pretend anymore. You can't go back to sleep. You can't unknow what your nervous system now recognizes as truth. That's why so many people talk about ascension, but few embody it. The popular version sells the idea that ascension is a reward for being spiritual enough. That if you meditate enough, believe the right things, avoid the wrong emotions, you'll eventually graduate out of pain. But that idea is built on the same mindset as everything else in the system. Earn, perform, ascend. And ascension doesn't work that way. Ascension is not something you achieve. It's something you stop resisting. The moment ascension actually begins is rarely dramatic. It often starts as discomfort, as restlessness, as the quiet realization that the life you're living no longer fits the awareness you're developing. You might not be able to explain it. You just know something feels off. Not wrong in a catastrophic way, just misaligned, like wearing clothes that used to fit but don't anymore. That's the first fracture, and it happens internally. Ascension doesn't add layers to who you are. It removes them. It strips away identities you didn't consciously choose, roles you inherited, beliefs you absorbed before you were old enough to question them. And when those layers start dissolving, it can feel like losing yourself, even though you're actually getting closer. This is why real ascension is rarely celebrated when it begins. It feels like confusion before clarity, like loss before freedom, like standing in an in-between space where the old way no longer works, but the new way hasn't fully revealed itself yet. No one talks about that part. You're told ascension will make you happier, lighter, more peaceful. And eventually it does. But first, it makes you honest. And honesty can be brutal when you've been living in compromise with yourself for years. Ascension forces you to see where you've been lying, not just to others, but to yourself. Where you've stayed small to belong. Where you've stayed silent to stay safe. Where you've numbed yourself to survive systems that never asked who you really were. That's not mystical, that's psychological and spiritual. Because spirituality without psychology is just avoidance. And ascension without grounding is just dissociation. The truth is, ascension has nothing to do with becoming higher. That language alone has done enormous damage. It creates hierarchy where none exists. It suggests some people are above others, more evolved, more chosen. And that belief alone is enough to derail the entire process. Ascension isn't vertical, it's integrative. It doesn't pull you away from your humanity. It pulls you deeper into it, into your body, into your emotions, into your responsibility for how you show up in the world. If your version of ascension disconnects you from empathy, accountability, or reality, it's not ascension. It's escape, dressed up as enlightenment. Real ascension anchors awareness into the nervous system. It teaches you how to remain present in discomfort instead of bypassing it, how to regulate instead of react, how to witness instead of suppress. And this is where things get uncomfortable for most people. Because ascension doesn't make life easier at first. It makes it more intense. Not because reality changes, but because your capacity to feel it expands. You become more sensitive, not weaker, more aware, more perceptive, more attuned to subtle shifts in energy, emotion, and intention. Things you once ignored now register clearly. Noise feels louder, dishonesty feels heavier, distraction feels exhausting. And if you don't understand what's happening, you might think something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong. You're just no longer numb. Ascension removes the buffer between you and experience, and that can feel overwhelming in a world designed to keep you dissociated. This is why ascension is often mislabeled as anxiety, depression, burnout, or loss of motivation. Because when the old rewards stop working, the system calls it dysfunction. When you no longer respond to the incentives that once controlled you, something must be wrong. But what's actually happening is recalibration. Your internal compass is coming back online. Ascension is the process of returning authority to the self. Not the ego self, the aware self. The part of you that can observe thoughts without being consumed by them. The part that can feel emotion without drowning in it. The part that doesn't need constant stimulation to feel alive. And that part has been dormant for most of your life. Not because you're broken, but because you were trained to live externally. To seek validation, direction, and meaning outside yourself. Ascension reverses that orientation. You stop asking, "What should I think?" and start asking, "What do I notice?" You stop chasing meaning and start recognizing coherence. You stop waiting for permission to trust your own perception. And this is where ascension becomes threatening to systems built on compliance. Because a person who can sit with themselves without distraction is very hard to manipulate. A person who understands their emotional triggers is difficult to provoke. A person who no longer needs external validation is no longer predictable. Ascension doesn't make you rebellious, it makes you sovereign. And sovereignty is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't argue, it doesn't convince. It simply disengages from what no longer resonates. This is why ascension often looks boring from the outside. No drama, no spectacle, just grounded presence, clear boundaries, fewer words, more intention. And internally, it feels like pressure before expansion. Because as awareness increases, the gap between who you are and how you've been living becomes impossible to ignore. That's the tension point. That's where people either deepen or retreat back into distraction. Some call it a dark night, others call it awakening sickness. Labels don't matter. What matters is understanding that this phase isn't failure. It's initiation. You're being asked to take responsibility for your consciousness. Not to control everything, not to perfect yourself, but to stop outsourcing your inner world. Ascension begins the moment you realize no one is coming to save you and that you don't need saving. That realization can feel devastating and liberating at the same time, because it means your life is no longer something that happens to you. It's something you participate in consciously. Even the uncomfortable parts. Especially the uncomfortable parts. Ascension doesn't promise comfort, it promises clarity. And clarity changes how you move, how you choose, how you relate. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what you chase. It changes what you fear. You begin to notice that fear thrives in unconsciousness. That anxiety feeds on imagined futures. That guilt feeds on unresolved pasts. And that presence dissolves all three. Not instantly, but consistently. This is why ascension is not an event. It's a practice. A moment-to-moment choice to remain aware instead of reactive, to feel instead of numb, to respond instead of perform. And the more you do this, the more obvious it becomes why the truth about ascension was never emphasized. Because ascension doesn't create followers, it creates adults. It doesn't make you dependent on teachers, timelines, or belief systems. It makes you accountable to your own awareness. And accountability is inconvenient in a world that profits from distraction. The first stage of ascension is disillusionment. The realization that the stories you were told about success, happiness, spirituality, even identity, don't hold up under awareness. That realization hurts, but it also clears space. Because once illusions fall, something quieter emerges underneath. Something stable, something real. And that's where the work truly begins. Because ascension doesn't stop at awareness. It moves into embodiment. And that's where everything changes. And that's the subtlety of ascension. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It hums. It moves through the quiet corridors of your awareness before the outer world even notices. You may feel a shift in energy long before you understand its origin. A sense that life is thinner, that surfaces no longer hold, that your old ways of coping are suddenly inadequate. It whispers in dreams. It resonates in fleeting thoughts that feel oddly familiar. That pull isn't coincidence. It's memory. Not memory in the ordinary sense, but a remembrance of who you really are. Unconditioned, unmediated, unfragmented. And this is why so many try to run from it. The old world is comfortable. The familiar patterns are like scaffolding. They provide security, identity, and validation. But ascension dismantles scaffolding from the inside. It doesn't just remove the structures around you. It reshapes the way you perceive the world entirely. Suddenly, you notice everything you once ignored, the subtle manipulations, the unconscious agreements, the invisible contracts you made with life just to survive. And when you see them, pretending they don't exist becomes impossible. This is the point where most people give up. Not because ascension is too difficult, but because honesty is too inconvenient. It's far easier to chase spiritual content, timelines, guided meditations, and external validation than it is to sit with what is actually happening inside your nervous system. It's easier to read someone else's words about awakening than to feel your own. And yet, the very thing you're avoiding is the doorway. The inner recalibration, the letting go of what was never yours, is the crucible that catalyzes true ascension. As this process unfolds, you start noticing patterns you once overlooked, repetitive thoughts that no longer serve you, emotions that flare with disproportionate intensity, relationships that feel hollow or performative. These aren't coincidences. They are indicators. They are feedback. Your system is revealing the areas that require attention, clarity, and integration. The old self doesn't dissolve instantly. It resists and pushes back, clinging to identity through defense mechanisms, denial, and distraction. And that resistance is precisely the terrain of ascension. It is not linear. It spirals. Some days you feel free and unburdened. Other days, trapped and uncertain. But each cycle is a deeper calibration of awareness. You begin to perceive reality differently, not because the world has changed, but because your perception has. The filters that once distorted life, the assumptions that governed your behavior, the unconscious identifications that dictated your reactions, they slowly dissolve. And in their absence, you find clarity, presence, and alignment. Ascension also redefines your relationship with time. You begin to notice that linear timelines are artificial constructs. The past isn't gone, and the future isn't something to chase. Everything exists simultaneously in a field of potential, and your consciousness is the lens through which it collapses into experience. That realization is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating, because it opens possibilities you never imagined. Terrifying, because it forces accountability. You cannot hide behind excuses, societal narratives, or limiting beliefs. Every choice, every thought, every emotion matters. And perhaps, most importantly, ascension reshapes your relationship with energy. You start noticing that the people, spaces, and situations you inhabit affect you far more than you realized. Your internal state no longer floats independent of your environment. It interacts, resonates, and responds to everything around you. This is why so many of the awakened feel a sense of pressure when entering crowded spaces, workplaces, or social gatherings. It is not social anxiety. It is a subtle attunement. Your body is recalibrating its resonance to match higher coherence. And in the midst of all this, you may feel alienated, isolated, different. Because ascension doesn't only separate you from illusion, it separates you from collective unconsciousness. Those who have not begun this process may appear shallow, reactive, or distracted, and you may feel lonely. But this isn't punishment. It is preparation. You are being positioned to operate from sovereignty, clarity, and responsibility. States that cannot exist when bound to unconscious norms. Ascension begins quietly. It begins internally. It begins in subtle shifts, in small recognitions, in moments when you feel like you no longer fit the old story. And those moments are not a curse. They are signals. They are invitations. They are evidence that the old systems of thought, belief, and identity are falling away. And once they fall, something new, something coherent, integrated, and sovereign can emerge. By now, you may realize that ascension is not about spiritual titles, guided experiences, or mystical events. It is not about how far you meditate or how much esoteric knowledge you can accumulate. Those are tools at best. At worst, they are distractions. Real ascension is the reclamation of yourself, your awareness, your nervous system, your body, your choices. It is remembering what it is to operate as a fully sovereign conscious being. And this is why the popular version is so misleading. It turns a process of radical responsibility into entertainment, fantasy, and speculation. It convinces you that ascension is something that happens out there instead of in here. It promises light without shadow, transcendence without integration, expansion without accountability. And none of that is sustainable. None of that is real. Because real ascension is messy. It is internal. It is cumulative. It is not something you can outsource. And that brings us to the threshold. This is the point where the deeper work begins. You have felt the pressure, the friction, the subtle discomfort that tells you something has shifted. You have noticed the cracks in old narratives, the hollowness in old patterns, the unignorable pull toward presence. Now we explore what ascension does to your body, your nervous system, your mind, and your perception. Because understanding the internal mechanics is crucial. Without it, the process feels random, overwhelming, even frightening. But once you see the map, once you understand the signals, you can navigate the process instead of being swept away by it. Ascension is not an event. It is a calibration, a process. And the deeper you go, the more you begin to see that every symptom, every shift, every disorientation is not a problem, it is a guide, a pointer to what is awakening within you. And it is precisely that awakening that will prepare you for the next phase, the part where awareness becomes embodiment, presence becomes coherence, and sovereignty becomes natural. Ascension isn't just a concept, it's a full-body phenomenon. And the body has been quietly carrying signals long before the mind understands them. Your nervous system remembers far more than your conscious mind does. It knows when the old systems are misaligned. It knows when your awareness is expanding. And it reacts accordingly through discomfort, restlessness, fatigue, and subtle shifts that most people dismiss as stress or aging. Every pulse in your body, every fluctuation of your energy is a response to this awakening. That's why so many people experience strange symptoms during ascension. Headaches, pressure in the head, heightened sensitivity to light or sound, tingling sensations, and sudden emotional surges. It isn't random. It isn't psychosomatic. It's your body recalibrating to a higher frequency, a frequency your old self was never equipped to handle. Energy doesn't exist separately from matter. Consciousness doesn't float above biology. In ascension, mind, body, and energy converge. Your thoughts influence your nervous system. Your emotions create chemical patterns in your body. Your awareness rewires neural pathways in ways modern science is only beginning to map. And the subtle energy systems, your chakras, your meridians, your biofield begin to reorganize themselves to match your expanding perception. Consider this. Your heart alone produces an electromagnetic field measurable several feet away from your body. Your brain generates coherent oscillations that can synchronize with the environment. And your entire nervous system is a network of energy conduits transmitting information at speeds faster than conscious thought. When you begin to ascend, these systems start functioning on a level they were designed for but rarely accessed. They begin to communicate in ways that feel unfamiliar because they are bypassing the old, conditioned filters. That's why intuition, once dismissed as gut feelings, becomes undeniable. You start noticing patterns, coincidences, and synchronicities that defy logic. Not because the world is suddenly magical, but because your perception is aligning with its deeper order. The frequency you carry begins to resonate with the underlying coherence of existence. And when your internal frequency is out of alignment with your environment, it creates friction, physical tension, emotional turbulence, and even social discomfort. The symptoms of ascension are signals of transformation. They aren't punishments. They aren't warnings of sickness. They are indicators that the old systems, both internal and external, can no longer contain the consciousness that is awakening. And this is where the mind often struggles. Because the human mind, conditioned to predict, control, and categorize, experiences this recalibration as disorientation. It is as if the ground beneath your feet is shifting, not in a literal sense, but in the energetic and perceptual layers of reality. And it does shift. You begin to perceive time differently. Past, present, and future collapse into a simultaneous field of potential. Memory and intuition intertwine. Dreams carry messages that your conscious mind cannot yet interpret. Thoughts begin to emerge, not from analysis, but from resonance. Decisions no longer require external validation because your body, your internal compass, starts providing unerring guidance. But that compass is raw, unfiltered, and sensitive. It requires patience, trust, and discernment. Emotions become magnified during this phase of ascension. Anger, grief, joy, and love no longer remain compartmentalized. They surge, ebb, and flow in waves that feel overwhelming at first. This intensity isn't a glitch. It's the expansion of your capacity to feel fully. In the old self, emotions were suppressed, denied, or redirected to maintain social safety. Ascension removes that buffer. It asks you to feel the depth of existence without avoidance. And this is why emotional mastery becomes central to the process. Not control, but awareness. Not suppression, but integration. Sleep patterns change. Energy rhythms shift. What once felt exhausting may now feel revitalizing, and what once felt routine may feel draining. The body is recalibrating to new vibrational states. Certain foods, environments, and even people begin to affect you differently. You unconsciously gravitate toward frequencies that support coherence and away from those that create dissonance. It's a natural sorting mechanism, aligning your external world with the internal shift. And while the body is recalibrating, the mind must evolve simultaneously. Cognitive patterns that once seemed logical now appear limited. Belief systems begin to unravel. Intellectual frameworks that defined reality feel insufficient. That tension between old mental structures and emerging awareness is uncomfortable. The mind resists the unknown, clings to certainty, and attempts to rationalize experiences that defy linear logic. And that's precisely the point. Ascension pushes the mind beyond conditioned frameworks, not to discard reason, but to expand its capacity to perceive reality holistically. Energy work, conscious or unconscious, becomes unavoidable. You begin to notice subtle shifts in your surroundings. The way a room feels, the weight of another's presence, the vibration of sound, light, and even thought. Your body acts as both receptor and transmitter. Every thought, Every emotion, every intention becomes a broadcast, influencing not only your internal state but the energy field around you. Ascension teaches that consciousness is never isolated. It is a wave, a field, a frequency that interacts with the collective, and your personal calibration contributes to the coherence or dissonance of that field. Some call this phenomenon awakening sickness or spiritual bypassing, but it is neither. Awakening sickness, in its rawest form, is the body's reaction to recalibration. Spiritual bypassing occurs when the mind attempts to escape the discomfort of transformation without processing it fully. True ascension integrates both: the internal shifts, the bodily signals, the emotional surges, and the mental recalibrations. It allows them to coexist as complementary forces, not as obstacles. The challenge is learning to navigate without judgment, to witness without resistance, and to align without force. The nervous system plays a central role. The autonomic nervous system, the network responsible for survival, stress response, and homeostasis, undergoes profound adjustments. The sympathetic system, responsible for fight or flight, may be hyperactive at first. Then, through conscious awareness, meditation, and embodied practices, the parasympathetic system, responsible for rest, repair, and alignment, becomes dominant. This isn't about relaxation alone. It is about restoring balance to a system that has been skewed for centuries by external conditioning, trauma, and environmental stressors. And then there's the subtle body. The meridians, chakras, and energetic fields do not exist in isolation from the physical. They interweave, modulate, and inform every cellular process. Ascension reactivates dormant pathways, clears blockages, and harmonizes the flow of life force. This process can manifest as heat, tingling, light perceptions, or sudden clarity. Those who ignore it, suppress it, or deny it often experience prolonged discomfort because the system is attempting to recalibrate anyway. The body demands alignment, whether consciously guided or not. Spiritual practices, meditation, breathwork, sound, movement are accelerants, not crutches. They guide the nervous system to synchronize with new frequencies, train perception, and integrate experiences. But the key is embodiment. Ascension is not an abstract state of mind. It is lived in the body. To ascend is to inhabit your full range of physical, emotional, mental, and energetic capacities. It is to be present, awake, and coherent at every level simultaneously. And that coherence radiates outward, influencing not only your own experience but the collective field. Your mind begins to perceive causal connections where once there was only chaos. You start to understand the ripple effects of thought, emotion, and action. You recognize patterns that connect seemingly disparate events. You sense the resonance of intentions, your own and others, and their capacity to shape reality. This isn't mysticism. It's observation. It's awareness applied in real time. It's the science of consciousness in action. As the nervous system, mind, and subtle body align, discernment becomes unavoidable. You no longer consume information blindly. You no longer accept cultural narratives without testing them against your inner knowing. You sense coherence, resonance, and alignment, and make choices based on them rather than external pressure. This is sovereignty. This is autonomy. This is the internal architecture of ascension. And yet, awareness alone isn't enough. Without embodiment, ascension can remain abstract. Your body may carry the frequency, but if the mind resists, if emotions remain unprocessed, if energy is misaligned, the process stalls. Ascension demands integration. Mind, body, and energy must function as a cohesive system. Only then does awareness translate into lived reality, presence into power, and insight into action. At this stage, the subtle distinction between external and internal begins to dissolve. The environment responds to your frequency. Relationships shift. Opportunities appear or disappear according to alignment. Synchronistic patterns accelerate. But these are not signs of luck. They are consequences of coherence. The universe is not punishing or rewarding. It is reflecting the alignment of consciousness. This is why the early stages of ascension feel chaotic. Not because the world is unstable, but because your perception has outgrown old filters. You are learning to operate in a multidimensional framework where cause and effect, emotion and intention, thought and energy are inseparable. You are learning to embody a consciousness that was previously dormant, and every symptom, every surge, every anomaly is a pointer. Pay attention, integrate, align. And as you integrate, the process shifts. The body settles, the mind clarifies. Energy flows. Disorientation is replaced by presence. Sensitivity transforms into discernment. Emotional turbulence gives way to coherence. And the inner compass becomes unerring, guiding you toward experiences that resonate with your true frequency. This is the foundation for the final phase of Ascension full embodiment. Integration is not passive. The body actively participates in Ascension, and it communicates constantly. Every tension, every sensation, every shift in your heartbeat is a signal. It asks for attention. It asks for recognition. It asks for alignment. And when you listen, even in small ways, the system begins to reorganize itself naturally. The mind stops forcing understanding. The emotions stop resisting. The subtle energy pathways clear without effort. This is the magic of embodiment. Not doing more, but allowing the body to become the vehicle through which Ascension expresses itself. Movement becomes a language. Your posture, your gestures, even your breath, carry meaning beyond intention. Walking in awareness, stretching, intentional motion, and conscious stillness all contribute to the harmonization of nervous system and energy field. The body becomes a living instrument, responsive, coherent, and aligned. And as you learn to inhabit this instrument fully, the inner turbulence begins to settle, and a profound sense of agency emerges. You are no longer passively reacting to life. You are co-creating it from a grounded, coherent place. Sleep itself changes. Dreams become portals for integration. Recurring patterns, symbols, and messages emerge, guiding you toward alignment. Some experiences feel almost otherworldly, as if the body is tapping into dimensions beyond the familiar three. And yet, it is not mystical. It is biological, energetic, and conscious. Your cells, neurons, and energy fields are recalibrating to frequencies that were once dormant, and dreams act as rehearsal spaces, laboratories for the integration of expanded awareness into everyday life. You may notice shifts in relationships. Certain people, places, and environments that once felt neutral may now drain you, while others suddenly resonate in ways you cannot explain. This is a reflection of alignment. Ascension is selective. It tunes your perception and sensitivity, and in doing so, it filters your experience. What remains in your life is increasingly coherent with your frequency. What leaves is not punishment, but liberation from misalignment. And learning to witness this without judgment is crucial. This discernment is one of the hallmarks of an awakened nervous system and aligned energy field. Emotions, once overwhelming, begin to stabilize as you integrate Ascension into your body and mind. The intensity of initial surges gives way to fluidity. You learn to navigate emotional waves instead of being swept away. Awareness becomes a stabilizer, coherence becomes a guide, and embodiment becomes the proof that Ascension is not a concept, it is a lived experience. At this stage, subtle perceptions accelerate. Intuition is no longer sporadic. Energy sensing is no longer optional. You recognize patterns, frequencies, and resonances in ways that were previously invisible. You begin to perceive causality as multi-dimensional, seeing how thought, emotion, and action ripple through space and time. This expanded perception is not overwhelming if grounded in the body and nervous system, but without embodiment, it becomes fragmented, leaving the mind scattered and the energy turbulent. This is why practices of grounding, breathwork, conscious movement, connection to nature, mindful nutrition, and rest are essential. They create the bridge between expanded awareness and the physical world, stabilizing the nervous system, harmonizing the energy body, and translating consciousness into practical, actionable living. Ascension is not about floating above life, It is about inhabiting it fully, consciously, and powerfully. And finally, the key to navigating this stage is surrender, not to external forces, not to ideology, but to the process itself. The body knows how to recalibrate. The nervous system knows how to harmonize. Your energy field knows how to integrate. Your mind knows how to perceive. All you need to do is witness, honor, and align with the flow, allowing awareness to guide integration. At this point, the stage is set for the final phase: embodiment in action, mastery of frequency, and conscious creation in the world. Section 3 will explore how these internal shifts translate into living, ascension, how frequency, coherence, and sovereignty become visible in daily life, relationships, and purpose. Now that your body, mind, and energy have begun to recalibrate, the question becomes, what do you do with it? Ascension is not a passive state. It is an invitation to live differently, to embody consciousness in every action, thought, and interaction. The shift you've been feeling, that subtle, almost imperceptible vibration under the surface of life, is calling you to step fully into your own sovereignty. It's one thing to understand ascension intellectually, it's another entirely to inhabit it as a lived reality. Embodiment begins with presence. Presence is the conscious inhabitation of your body, energy, and awareness. It means noticing every sensation, every thought, every emotional fluctuation, without judgment or resistance. It is the difference between floating through life and moving intentionally, guided by an internal compass that is no longer dictated by external systems, cultural conditioning, or the expectations of others. Presence is the foundation of ascension because it allows the frequency of your consciousness to express fully in the physical world. When you embody presence, you begin to see the subtle dynamics of energy everywhere. Relationships shift because you no longer unconsciously absorb the emotions, projections, and expectations of others. You feel resonance instead of obligation. You choose coherence over convenience, and the people who remain in your life are no longer distractions or drains. They are mirrors, catalysts, and co-creators of your evolving frequency. Your interactions become conscious exchanges of energy rather than unconscious habits. Mastery begins with awareness, but it is sustained through integration. Integration is the practice of translating expanded perception into daily life. It is the application of frequency in thought, emotion, and action. For example, when you experience anger, ascension does not ask you to suppress it. It asks you to feel it fully, understand its origin, and transmute it into clarity and constructive action. When you encounter fear, it is an opportunity to observe, understand, and expand beyond it. Every internal state becomes a tool for refinement, not a burden to escape. Your body is the laboratory for this work. Every breath, every heartbeat, every gesture becomes a signal, a measure, and a tool. Conscious breathing aligns your nervous system, clears blockages and energy channels, and enhances your ability to navigate life with coherence. Movement, whether yoga, dance, martial arts, or mindful walking, grounds frequency into matter. Sound your voice, your humming, your intentional vibration can recalibrate internal fields and harmonize your environment. In essence, the physical body becomes the instrument through which ascension expresses itself, translating subtle energy into tangible reality. The world around you will reflect these shifts. Environments that once felt neutral or comforting may suddenly feel dissonant. People who were once close may drift, while new connections arise spontaneously, resonating with your evolving frequency. These external shifts are not coincidences. They are the natural consequence of internal alignment. Ascension is selective. It filters, harmonizes, and amplifies. It rewards coherence and releases what no longer serves your evolution. And learning to witness these changes without attachment is critical. Spiritual practices amplify embodiment but do not replace it. Meditation, breathwork, journaling, energy healing, and conscious rituals act as accelerants, guiding frequency into coherence. But embodiment is lived between sessions. In the way you move through the world, make decisions, respond to stress, and interact with others. Ascension is measured not in mystical experiences, but in the consistency of presence, clarity, and alignment in daily life. The mind evolves simultaneously. No longer confined to linear thinking, you begin to perceive patterns, synchronicities, and causal relationships invisible to those still bound by conventional awareness. Intuition becomes a reliable guide, not a curious anomaly. The inner compass is honed, and decision-making becomes an art of resonance rather than analysis. You trust what feels coherent, even if it defies societal logic. You stop seeking permission from external authorities and begin listening to the authority within. At this stage, you realize that ascension is also about contribution. Sovereignty does not mean isolation. Living aligned frequency naturally influences the collective field. Every choice, every interaction, every act of integrity becomes a ripple, subtly shifting the collective consciousness. You begin to understand that your ascension is inseparable from the awakening of those around you. The energy you embody serves as a template, a blueprint, and a signal for others who are also remembering. But embodiment also requires courage. It asks you to step into authenticity even when it is uncomfortable, to speak truth even when it contradicts popular narratives, to act from alignment even when it challenges relationships, career paths, or long-held identities. The ascension path does not reward conformity. It rewards coherence. And the more consistently you embody your truth, the more the external world recalibrates to reflect that frequency. Integration also involves shadow work. The old self does not vanish instantly. The unresolved emotions, traumas, and unconscious patterns must be acknowledged, felt, and transmuted. Ascension is not escapism. It is confrontation and refinement. The ego is not destroyed. It is harmonized. The mind is not silenced. It is aligned. And the soul, the core essence, becomes the organizing principle around which body, mind, and energy cohere. At this stage, the subtle body and physical body are fully interwoven. Energy is no longer something abstract or external. It flows seamlessly through your organs, muscles, nervous system, and biofield. You perceive intention as a tangible force. Your thoughts sculpt experience. Your emotions shape your reality. And your alignment acts as a bridge between higher dimensional awareness and the three-dimensional world. Ascension, then, is not a final destination. It is continuous evolution, a living practice of awareness, coherence, and presence. Each day, you are presented with opportunities to embody frequency, integrate experiences, and refine alignment. The challenges, the dissonances, and the discomforts are not obstacles. They are calibrations. They are checkpoints, feedback loops, and accelerants that guide you toward mastery. And this brings us to the most crucial realization. Ascension is your sovereignty. It is the reclamation of self, power, and frequency. No teacher, ritual, or external system can awaken you fully. That awakening comes from within. The tools, practices, and knowledge you encounter are accelerants, not authorities. Your body, your mind, and your energy field are the true instruments of evolution. So here is your invitation: to live intentionally, to align with frequency in every thought, every emotion, every action, to honor your body as a sacred vessel, your mind as a conscious instrument, and your energy as a creative force, to choose coherence over conformity, presence over distraction, and authenticity over compromise, to step fully into sovereignty while remaining compassionate, aware, and connected to the collective awakening. Ascension is not about escaping life. It is about mastering it. It is not about chasing power. It is about embodying it. It is not about external validation. It is about internal resonance. And once you realize this, you understand that the path of ascension was never about becoming something other. It was always about remembering who you already are. If any part of this resonates, if your body, mind, and energy are stirring with recognition, then it is your moment to act. Begin with presence. Begin with embodiment. Begin with integration. And know this: the awakening doesn't happen somewhere else. It happens here, in you, right now. To guide you further on this path, we've created Insights Academy, a free resource where we share teachings, practices, and knowledge too potent to publish elsewhere. Join using the link below, and you'll also receive a free copy of the Kybellion, a guide designed to support your ascension journey. Don't wait for permission. The shift is already within you. Step into it, embody it, and allow your frequency to ripple outward, influencing the collective and reclaiming the power that was always yours. Ascension is not a future event. It is not a destination. It is the conscious choice to remember, embody, and radiate your true frequency. It is your sovereignty. It is your gift. It is your responsibility. And the world is waiting for you to awaken fully.